In 1985, at the Car Audio Nationals in California, a standard sedan rolled into the judging lanes and delivered a physical shockwave. The trunk rattled, the steel frame shook. The sound pressure meter crossed 130 decibels, a level of mechanical bass that felt like a localized earthquake. The source of this violence was not a massive industrial power plant. It was a pair of Rockford Fosgate Punch subwoofers driven by a single aluminum-finned amplifier stamped with a seemingly impossible number: 45 watts. That tiny rating was a deliberate deception. It was a mathematical Trojan horse that allowed American teenagers and independent stereo shops to dominate sound competitions, building a trunk-based subculture that took over Friday nights from Los Angeles to Florida. For a decade, the Punch name on a black heatsink meant undisputed street authority. Yet years later, while the logo remained, the Tempe, Arizona factory where American hands soldered those gold-plated boards had gone quiet. The speaker worked, the amplifier delivered, but the business model that built the loudest trunk in America was already heading toward a junction it could not navigate. Every week, we tell the stories of the American speakers, audio brands, stereo stores, and car audio shops that once shaped how people heard music, movies, and memory, and what happened when the market moved on. Subscribe if that history matters to you. The story begins not with nostalgia, but with a specific place, in Tempe, Arizona, in 1973. In 1973, the American automobile was a cathedral of mechanical engineering, but an acoustic wasteland. The domestic automotive industry was building massive steel cruisers in Detroit, outfitting them with V8 engines and expansive bench seats. But the audio systems placed inside the dash were treated as an afterthought. Before a company in Tempe, Arizona changed the geometry of mobile sound, the American driver had to accept the factory-installed AM/FM radio. These systems usually relied on a single, oval-shaped paper speaker mounted in the center of the dashboard, or perhaps a pair of weak speakers placed on the rear deck. They were designed to broadcast news, weather, and lightly compressed pop music at low volumes. The problem was not just cheap paper cones. The problem was physics. An automobile operates on a 12-volt direct current electrical system. In the early 1970s, the standard method for generating audio power from a 12-volt battery yielded roughly 2 to 4 watts of clean output. If a driver turned the volume knob up to overcome highway wind noise, the sound immediately collapsed into distortion. Unwanted change added to the sound by the amplifier running out of power. To create actual bass, a speaker needs to physically move a large volume of air. Moving a large volume of air requires a large cone. Controlling a large cone requires significant electrical power. In 1973, that power simply did not exist inside an American car. Enter Jim Fosgate, an audio engineer and inventor working in a small shop in Tempe, Arizona. Fosgate understood that a car interior was arguably the worst possible environment for hi-fi, short for high fidelity, meaning sound reproduction that tries to stay faithful to the original recording. A car was a small, asymmetrical metal box filled with glass, plush upholstery, and road noise that actively masked low frequencies. To solve this, Fosgate did not just build a better speaker, he attacked the electrical limitation. In 1973, he introduced the Fosgate PR75 Punch Equalizer. Equalizer, an electronic circuit that allows a user to boost or cut specific frequency ranges, such as bass and treble. The PR75 was not a conventional piece of home hi-fi equipment ported over to a vehicle. It was specifically engineered to force a car stereo to compensate for the acoustic hostility of the cabin. It aggressively boosted the low bass and the high treble, creating a powerful, dynamic sound curve that cut through engine rumble and tire noise. The cost of this acoustic revolution was steep. The PR75 launched with a retail price of $199. Adjusted for inflation, that was roughly equivalent to over $1,300 today. A staggering sum to ask a driver to spend on an aftermarket radio accessory when standard stereos were viewed as disposable features. But for the listeners who heard the early demonstrations, the price was immediately justified. The music no longer sounded like it was trapped inside the dashboard. It felt present, physical, and anchored in the room of the vehicle. Jim Fosgate had solved the automotive electrical barrier. Now, he needed a way to build thousands of them without losing the raw power that made the prototype famous. In 1980, to transform a brilliant prototype into a national standard, the company secured outside investment, reorganized under the Rockford Corporation, and officially became Rockford Fosgate. They expanded their manufacturing footprint in Tempe, Arizona, building a factory floor dedicated entirely to the brute force physics of automotive sound. This was not a sterile, automated assembly plant. It was a domestic electronics workshop. Inside the Tempe facility, American workers hand-soldered thick copper traces onto heavy-duty circuit boards. They manually wound the copper wire around the toroidal transformers for the internal power supplies. They were building audio equipment the way Detroit built engine blocks: heavy, over-engineered, and designed to survive extreme conditions. But a premium American amplifier could not be sold at a Sears Auto Center or a standard car dealership. The factory radio was a closed loop, and department store clerks did not know how to bypass it. To reach the listener, Rockford Fosgate had to rely on a newly emerging American retail channel: the 12-volt specialty shop. 12-volt specialty shop, a retail store and installation garage dedicated entirely to selling, designing, and wiring aftermarket automotive electronics. Throughout the early 1980s, these independent businesses began appearing in strip malls across Southern California, Texas, and Florida. They featured display boards glowing with aftermarket cassette decks, walls lined with component speakers, and open garage bays where wood and fiberglass speaker enclosures were custom-built for specific trunks. These independent dealers became the evangelists of the Tempe sound. They demonstrated to suburban teenagers and car enthusiasts that a vehicle could be torn apart and rebuilt into a rolling listening room. The financial commitment was staggering: a dedicated Rockford Fosgate amplifier, a custom subwoofer enclosure, and the skilled labor to run heavy-gauge copper wire under the floorboards could easily cost over $1,000 in early 1980s currency. That price created a sudden, jarring paradox in American car culture. A high school student working a minimum wage job might spend an entire summer's paycheck to put a stereo system into a used Chevrolet Camaro that cost less than the audio equipment itself. The product that began to solidify this culture was the early Punch series amplifier, which utilized MOSFET technology. MOSFET, a specific type of transistor that handles high electrical currents efficiently, allowing an amplifier to produce massive power without melting down inside a hot car trunk. By integrating Jim Fosgate's original Punch equalization circuit directly into a high-current MOSFET amplifier, the Tempe factory created a single, heavy metal brick that manipulated the entire acoustic environment of a vehicle. Early reviews in magazines like Audio and the emerging car stereo enthusiast press began to document the shift. The brand was no longer just repairing the anemic sound of a factory radio. It was establishing a completely new, aggressive standard for mobile high fidelity. Rockford Fosgate had successfully built the machine, and the independent American dealer network was enthusiastically installing it. But to turn a profitable audio company into a dominant cultural empire, the Tempe factory needed a flagship model that would turn raw power into a competitive sport. The product that redefined the American automotive listening room was a heavy industrial block of aluminum known as the Punch 45. Released to the market alongside its larger sibling, the Punch 75, the amplifier did not look like traditional home audio equipment. It looked like a weapon. The outer shell was a massive cast aluminum heatsink finished in a brutal satin black. Enthusiasts and installers quickly nicknamed it the Toast Rack because of its tall, aggressive thermal fins. Those fins were not a stylistic choice. They were a thermodynamic necessity. Amplifying bass in a sealed car trunk in the middle of a Texas summer generated immense heat, and the Toast Rack design pulled that heat away from the internal circuitry to keep the music playing. But an amplifier cannot move air by itself. To translate this massive electrical force into physical impact, Rockford Fosgate launched the Punch series of drivers, focusing heavily on the Punch 10, Punch 12, and massive Punch 15 models. Subwoofer, a speaker designed to reproduce very low bass frequencies. These drivers were visually unmistakable and mechanically ruthless. They featured a rugged pressed paper cone, a massive magnetic motor structure, and a distinct orange and black aesthetic. More importantly, they utilized a thick, highly durable foam surround. Foam surround, the flexible ring around a woofer cone that lets it move in and out. This surround allowed the cone to achieve massive excursion, moving forward and backward aggressively, without tearing apart under pressure. Inside the motor structure, the driver relied on an oversized, high-temperature voice coil. Voice coil, a coil of wire attached to the speaker cone that moves when electricity passes through it. When the Punch 45 amplifier sent high-current electricity into that voice coil, it became incredibly hot. Rockford's engineering ensured the coil could survive temperatures that would literally melt the adhesives inside competing speaker brands. The speaker was designed to take abuse and turn it into low-frequency energy. To acquire this level of performance, an American listener had to pay a serious premium. In the mid-1980s, a Punch 45 retailed for roughly $250, while a pair of Punch subwoofers could easily add another $200 to $300 to the bill. Adjusted for inflation, an entry-level system was a nearly $1,500 investment. This represented more than a month's wages for the average American teenager working a part-time job. It was an astronomical price tag, in an era when a basic replacement radio from a mall electronics store cost $50. Yet the products sold faster than the Tempe factory could hand solder them. The distribution breakthrough happened entirely outside of traditional retail channels. Big box stores like Sears or early Circuit City locations did not know how to sell, wire, or tune this highly specialized equipment. Instead, the brand relied completely on independent 12-volt shops. Places like Speakerworks in Southern California, Audio Express in the Southwest, local installation garages across Florida, and underground custom audio dealers in Texas. These shops featured custom-built demo boards where a salesperson could instantly switch between a standard radio and a Rockford Fosgate system. The difference was not subtle, it was violent. When a teenager sat in a shop's demo vehicle, the bass could be felt in the chest. The rearview mirror would vibrate until it was useless. The license plate would rattle violently against the trunk lid. The metal panels of the doors would physically flex. This network of independent installers created an impenetrable American moat for the brand. Competitors could reverse engineer the circuitry, but they could not easily replicate the religious loyalty of the dealer network, nor could they copy the raw thermal stability of the amplifier. A Punch 45 could run hot enough to burn a bare hand, yet it would continue to play without triggering its internal protection circuits. But the true genius of the Punch series, and the secret that answered the question of the 130 decibel trunk in California, was a strategy of deliberate deception. This was the era when organized car audio competitions began to take shape. It started with events like the Car Audio Nationals, or CANIAC, in 1985, which eventually formalized into the International Auto Sound Challenge Association, or IASCA, by 1987. These organizations created a competitive sport out of stereo systems. To keep the playing field fair, judges divided competitors into classes based on total amplifier wattage. If a competitor entered the 0 to 50 watts class, their amplifiers could not legally exceed a combined factory rating of 50 watts. Rockford Fosgate understood this rule, and they exploited it flawlessly. They rated the Punch 45 at exactly 22.5 watts per channel, making it a 45-watt amplifier on paper. But that measurement was taken at a standard, safe electrical resistance. The amplifier was secretly designed with an overbuilt power supply to remain perfectly stable at a much lower impedance. Impedance, the electrical load a speaker presents to an amplifier. When a clever audio installer wired multiple Punch subwoofers together in a specific pattern, they dropped the impedance from a standard 4 ohms down to 2 ohms or even lower. A normal amplifier presented with that load would instantly overheat, catch fire, or shut down. The Punch 45 simply opened its internal current gates wider. In the competition lanes, a Punch 45, legally classified as a harmless 45-watt amplifier, was regularly producing over 150 watts of continuous dynamic power. It was a cheater amp. When an American teenager with a single Punch 45 pulled up next to a competitor using a massive, cheap 200-watt import amplifier, the Rockford system would completely obliterate them. The street reputation was instant. To own a Punch amplifier and a pair of Punch subwoofers was to own the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Friday night cruising strip. The badge on the grill was not decoration. It was a promise about sound. The Punch 45 was no longer just an amplifier on a shop shelf. It was an entry ticket to a subculture that was taking over American streets. By the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, Rockford Fosgate was no longer just manufacturing electronics. They were fueling an American acoustic movement. The brand had successfully weaponized the trunk of the automobile. To understand the scale of this empire, you have to look at the specific communities that adopted the Tempe sound. The Punch series dominated the custom installation bays in Southern California. It was the absolute standard for bass enthusiasts cruising the wide avenues of Dallas, Texas. It rattled the beachfront strips in Miami, Florida. It became a status symbol in the high school parking lots of Phoenix, Arizona. It commanded respect in the underground audio competitions in Detroit, Michigan, and it filled the showroom demonstration boards of independent 12-volt shops across suburban Chicago. In these places, listening to music was no longer a passive experience. In a cramped American car interior, where factory paper speakers once made a cassette tape sound flat and lifeless, the right combination of high current power and heavy-duty woofers could turn the driver's seat into the physical center of a private, rolling concert. The cultural peak of this era was the Friday night cruising strip. Across the country, young Americans would gather in parking lots and drive slowly down main thoroughfares, their windows rolled down, broadcasting their musical tastes to the neighborhood. In this environment, volume was social currency. The deep, heavy bass of a Rockford Fosgate Punch 15 subwoofer could travel for blocks, announcing a driver's arrival long before the vehicle was visible. A massive catalyst for this era was the arrival of digital audio in the dashboard. Compact disc, or CD, a digital optical disc data storage format that provided a perfectly clean, uncompressed, low-frequency signal, unlike the physically limited bass response of a standard cassette tape. When a pristine CD recording of heavy hip-hop or electronic bass music was sent through a Rockford Fosgate amplifier, the dynamic range was staggering. The equipment finally had a source signal that could push the drivers to their maximum mechanical limits. The Tempe, Arizona factory had to expand dramatically to keep up with this demand. The assembly lines ran relentlessly. Inside the facility, the air smelled of hot rosin flux and machine oil. American workers operated CNC machines to mill the heavy aluminum heat sinks, while technicians hand-tested circuit boards on the bench before they were cleared for packaging. At its peak, Rockford Fosgate was manufacturing hundreds of thousands of amplifiers and speakers annually, supporting a sprawling network of over 1,000 independent specialty dealers. The company's catalog expanded to include massive multi-channel amplifiers like the Punch 150, specialized active crossovers, and a wide array of speaker sizes, all carrying the signature brutalist aesthetic. The demand for volume became so extreme that the equipment began to overpower the cars themselves. A pair of heavy-duty subwoofers driven by a high-current amplifier required immense electrical reserves. The standard 60-amp alternator inside a Honda Civic or a Chevrolet Monte Carlo could not supply enough voltage. Headlights would dim perfectly in time with the bass drops. Rear-view mirrors would vibrate completely off the windshield glass. Trunk latches would physically snap under the sheer air pressure generated by the sealed speaker cabinets. The speakers did not fail. The vehicles housing them began to surrender. This physical destruction only fueled the brand's legendary street status. Car audio magazines, such as Car Audio and Electronics and Auto Sound and Security, frequently featured custom builds where the entire backseat of a vehicle was gutted and replaced by a wall of Rockford Fosgate subwoofers. These were no longer just cars with stereos. They were stereo systems that happened to have wheels. The independent stereo store was the temple of this culture. The retail space was defined by the smell of cut medium-density fiberboard from the back installation bay and the glowing wall of head units in the front showroom. The dealer network thrived on the labor margins of these high-end installations. The ecosystem was perfectly balanced. The Tempe factory built the indestructible hardware, the local dealer provided the custom woodwork and wiring, and the American consumer provided a bottomless demand for louder, deeper sound. Rockford Fosgate had conquered the American street, but a new, highly extreme competitive format was about to push their engineering to the absolute edge of physics. In 1994, the American car audio scene shifted from subjective listening to objective violence. That year, an audio professional named Wayne Harris formalized a new competition format called DB drag racing. Unlike earlier IASCA events that balanced sound quality with installation aesthetics, DB drag racing measured exactly one metric: pure, unadulterated acoustic pressure. SPL, sound pressure level. An objective measurement of how much a sound wave physically alters atmospheric pressure inside a sealed space. In the DB drag lanes, two vehicles parked side by side. A specialized microphone was placed on the dashboard. The doors and windows were sealed shut. For a few seconds, the systems played a specific low-frequency test tone, and a digital meter recorded the peak decibel level. The goal was not musicality. The goal was to generate a mechanical shockwave. If a windshield shattered under the air pressure, the competitor was celebrated. Rockford Fosgate hardware was engineered exactly for this kind of mechanical abuse. The massive cast aluminum heat sinks of the Punch amplifiers and the rigid pressed paper cones of the Punch subwoofers became the standard arsenal for serious competitors. The Tempe factory's philosophy of overbuilding power supplies paid off spectacularly. Competitors would deliberately wire their subwoofers to present dangerously low electrical impedances, forcing the amplifiers to dump massive amounts of current. Competing amplifiers would enter thermal shutdown, blow their fuses, or literally catch fire. The Punch amplifiers just became hot enough to burn a bare hand, and kept playing. The brand began to utterly dominate the American competition circuit. To own a Rockford Fosgate system in the mid-1990s was to hold an undisputed rank in the car audio hierarchy. The scale of the company's success became staggering. The Tempe manufacturing facility was operating at absolute maximum capacity, pushing out over 100,000 amplifiers and subwoofers annually. The brand had expanded into a massive global export, shipping the concept of heavy American bass to Europe, Japan, and beyond. They introduced the monstrous Punch Power series, pushing their engineering limits even further to satisfy the insatiable demand for extreme volume. Rockford Fosgate was no longer just an electronics manufacturer. It was a lifestyle brand. The distinctive Diamond R logo appeared on t-shirts, leather jackets, and massive vinyl decals stretched across the rear windows of customized trucks. In a listening culture that increasingly valued aggressive hip-hop, heavy metal, and electronic dance music, the Punch EQ circuit became the literal definition of how modern bass was supposed to feel. The stakes were intensely physical. In a small American car interior, the right audio system did not just reproduce the sound of a kick drum. It moved enough air to blur the driver's vision, vibrate their vocal cords, and completely isolate them from the outside world. Every weekend, in thousands of independent installation bays and parking lots across the country, young Americans spent massive amounts of their disposable income trying to achieve that specific physical sensation. But this massive scale required an incredibly heavy industrial footprint. Every amplifier that left the Tempe loading dock represented pounds of raw cast aluminum, heavy copper wire, gold-plated circuit boards, and hours of skilled domestic labor. As the company grew into a corporate giant, the sheer cost of building heavy metal in the American desert began to weigh against the balance sheet. The Tempe factory had built a perfect machine for the era. The independent dealer network sold it flawlessly. The American teenager bought it relentlessly. At its height, Rockford Fosgate did not follow car audio trends. It dictated them. But as the 1990s wore on, the very cars these speakers lived in were beginning to change. The first sign of trouble did not come from a competing amplifier brand. It came from the dashboard of a standard American commuter car. For decades, the entire American car audio industry relied on a universal manufacturing standard, the DIN slot. This was a simple, rectangular opening in the vehicle's dashboard. A teenager could slide out the weak factory radio, slide in a high-performance aftermarket unit, and run a set of copper RCA cables straight to a Rockford Fosgate amplifier in the trunk. That clean, uncompressed signal was the lifeblood of the entire trunk-based subculture. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, automotive manufacturers began to change the geometry of the interior. Companies like Honda, Ford, and General Motors integrated the radio directly into a single, sweeping piece of molded plastic. The stereo was no longer a separate box. It was physically and electronically fused with the climate controls, the warning lights, and the vehicle's computer system. To remove the factory radio, an installer would essentially have to destroy the center console. This was the arrival of Force 5, a massive technological and retail shift that altered the listening environment. The American automobile was actively locking out the aftermarket audio industry. For the young driver who used to build their first stereo system in a driveway on a Saturday afternoon, the barrier to entry suddenly became impossibly high. You could not easily send a clean audio signal to a punch amplifier if you could not change the radio. The industry tried to fight back with complex electronic line-out converters, attempting to splice into the factory speaker wires. But the resulting sound was often compromised. The simple, democratic era of massive aftermarket stereo upgrades was beginning to fracture. This structural shift choked the independent 12-volt specialty shops. These dealers were the vital arteries of the Rockford Fosgate empire. They survived on the high labor margins of installing full systems, running heavy-gauge power wire under carpets, building custom fiberglass subwoofer enclosures, and tuning the crossovers. When the dashboard became a closed system, the pipeline of entry-level customers dried up. Across California, Texas, and Florida, the garage bays that once smelled of cut medium-density fiberboard and soldering iron smoke began to sit empty. The independent stereo store, the only place that knew how to properly demonstrate the violent power of the Tempe sound, was quietly disappearing. While the retail ecosystem was collapsing, the factory in Arizona was facing a brutal internal mathematical problem. This was Force 1. The crushing reality of domestic manufacturing costs. Rockford Fosgate had built its reputation on brute physical force and thermal mass. The punch amplifiers required massive cast aluminum heat sinks to survive the suffocating heat of a sealed car trunk. The internal power supplies required heavy copper transformers. The circuit boards required gold plating and meticulous hand soldering by skilled American workers. In the early 2000s, the global cost of raw aluminum and copper surged. The cost of domestic labor in Arizona continued to rise. The Tempe facility was becoming an incredibly expensive machine to operate. A premium American-made amplifier with an honest, underrated power specification simply cost more to manufacture than the changing mass market was willing to pay. The buyers who still wanted bass were shifting their retail habits. Instead of visiting a dedicated 12-volt installation shop to consult with an expert, they were walking into big-box electronics retailers like Best Buy or Circuit City. On these brightly lit shelves, the heavy, expensive Rockford Fosgate amplifier sat directly next to a flood of cheap, imported electronics. This was Force 3, the pressure of imports and good enough sound. These imported brands played a completely different game. They abandoned the heavy heat-generating Class AB circuitry that made the Punch series famous. Instead, they used lighter, cheaper Class D amplifier technology. More dangerously, they stamped astronomically fake power ratings on their cardboard boxes. An imported amplifier might boast a massive 1,000-watt sticker, while physically weighing a fraction of a true 45-watt Rockford Fosgate Punch amplifier. To a teenager walking down a retail aisle without a knowledgeable dealer to demonstrate the physical difference, the cheaper, imported option looked like a better deal. The market stopped rewarding over-engineered American power. It started rewarding cheap wattage, flashy packaging, and retail convenience. By the late 1990s, Rockford Corporation had become a publicly traded company to fuel its global expansion. But Wall Street demanded continuous, aggressive, quarter-over-quarter growth. The pressure to maintain massive profit margins collided directly with the reality of building heavy electronics in the American Southwest. The shareholders expected scale. The automotive industry was locking down the dashboard. The big box stores demanded cheaper inventory. The Tempe factory was caught in a shrinking space. The foundation was cracking, and the company was approaching a turning point that would permanently alter what the punch badge meant to the American street. When a manufacturing company goes public, its primary allegiance shifts from the audio enthusiast to the shareholder. Rockford Corporation had traded on the NASDAQ, and the financial reality of the early 2000s was unforgiving. The American car audio market was shrinking, and the cost of maintaining a massive domestic labor force in Arizona was destroying profit margins. To survive the retail price war against cheap imported electronics, the executives made the only mathematical decision available. They began to dismantle the American manufacturing machine. This was the brutal reality of Force 4, corporate consolidation and brand dilution. In the early 2000s, production of the core punch amplifier and subwoofer lines was systematically shifted offshore to Asian manufacturing partners. The brand was forced to abandon the heavy, labor-intensive philosophy that had built its reputation. The physical products changed immediately. The massive cast aluminum heat sinks that defined the original toast rack amplifiers were replaced by lighter, thinner extruded aluminum. The internal architecture shifted from rugged, through-hole components that required hand soldering to automated surface mount technology. Surface mount technology, a method where robotic machines place microscopic electrical components directly onto the surface of a circuit board, eliminating the need for human hands to solder wire leads. This automated process was incredibly efficient and highly cost-effective. But it removed the heavy, over-engineered durability that allowed a teenager to abuse a Punch 45 all summer without it failing. To compete on the brightly lit shelves of Best Buy, the brand also had to embrace Class D amplifier technology. Class D amplifier, an electronic design that rapidly switches power on and off to create high volume with very little heat, allowing the amplifier to be built smaller, lighter, and cheaper. Class D was a brilliant engineering solution for space and efficiency, but it lacked the warm, dynamic, physical punch of the heavy Class AB amplifiers that Jim Fosgate had pioneered. The equipment became lighter, the packaging became flashier, the prices dropped to meet the demands of the big box retail buyer. Soon, the legendary punch badge was slapped onto entry-level gear. A young driver in 2006 could walk into a mall and buy a Rockford Fosgate Punch subwoofer that weighed a fraction of the original orange and black paper cone drivers from 1989. The logo was exactly the same. The acoustic promise behind it had been entirely diluted. The brand was no longer the undisputed heavyweight champion of the street. It was just another logo competing in a crowded, race-to-the-bottom retail aisle. As the hardware became cheaper and more commoditized, the cultural infrastructure that supported it completely collapsed. The independent 12-volt specialty shops, the local dealers who had built custom fiberglass enclosures, tuned the crossovers, and demonstrated the violent power of the Tempe sound, were starved of oxygen. They could not survive selling low-margin imported equipment, and they could not bypass the increasingly complex, computerized dashboards of modern American cars. Throughout the 2000s, an extinction-level event hit the American car audio retail sector. Thousands of independent installation garages went out of business. The bays that once hosted DB drag racing competitors and Friday night cruising clubs were sold off, boarded up, or converted into window tinting businesses and quick lube oil shops. The expert salespeople who knew how to wire a 2-ohm stable system moved on to other industries. At the exact same time, the American youth culture underwent a massive shift. For decades, the automobile was the ultimate symbol of teenage freedom, and a loud stereo was the ultimate social signal. But by the late 2000s, the smartphone had arrived. The status symbol of American youth moved from a vibrating car trunk to a glowing screen in their pocket. Teenagers stopped spending their summer wages on heavy-duty subwoofers and copper wiring. They spent it on mobile data plans, digital downloads, and portable electronics. The market for extreme mechanical bass simply evaporated. Back in Tempe, Arizona, the assembly lines that once smelled of rosin flux and machine oil were shut down. The American workers who had hand-wound the toroidal transformers and bolted the MOSFETs to the black aluminum heat sinks were laid off. The physical footprint of American car audio manufacturing shrank until almost nothing was left. The company survived by pivoting to marine audio, off-road vehicle systems, and specialized OEM partnerships with automakers, providing factory-upgraded stereos directly to companies like Nissan. They survived as a corporation. The American listening culture they built did not. The cruising strips emptied, the independent shops closed, the dashboard locked out the aftermarket. The heavy heat sinks disappeared. The youth culture shifted to smartphones. The big box stores won the price war. The factory floor went quiet. The heavy American amplifier died. The toast rack was gone. The Tempe lines stopped. The brand became a label. The Punch logo remained bold on the heatsink. But the hands that wound the transformers and hand soldered the boards in Tempe were gone. The Tempe assembly lines are gone. The hand-soldered circuit boards have been replaced by robotic surface mount machines in overseas facilities, and the independent 12-volt specialty shops that once anchored American car audio have largely vanished from the strip malls of California, Texas, and Florida. Yet, the physical legacy of the Rockford Fosgate Punch empire refuses to stay quiet. Across the secondary market, a vibrant preservation and enthusiast community keeps the early engineering alive. On eBay, Craigslist, and specialized vintage audio forums, collectors aggressively hunt for the original satin black toast rack amplifiers and the distinctive orange and black paper cone subwoofers from the late 1980s and early 1990s. YouTube restoration channels feature meticulous technicians desoldering dried-out capacitors, cleaning corroded terminals, and restoring the heavy aluminum heat sinks to showroom condition. Specialized refoaming services replace deteriorated foam surrounds, bringing original drivers back to life so they can move air the way they did 30 years ago. This preservation culture passes what documentary storytelling calls the not nostalgia test. These vintage components matter today, not merely because people remember them fondly, but because of what they physically do. An original Class AB punch amplifier paired with a properly built heavy-duty subwoofer delivers a warm, dynamic, physical weight that lightweight, modern Class D digital amplifiers often struggle to replicate. It is an honest, brute-force mechanical translation of electricity into physical air pressure. When a restored system fires up, it proves that the original engineering philosophy was not a marketing gimmick. It was a durable, functional reality, built to survive the harshest acoustic environment in automotive history. Today, if you drive out to the desert industrial parks of Tempe, Arizona, the original Rockford Fosgate manufacturing facility, where American workers hand-wound toroidal transformers and bolted heavy transistors to aluminum heat sinks, is no longer an active audio empire. The physical site has evolved. Some buildings have been repurposed into modern corporate offices or logistics warehouses, while others bear completely different company names. Their loading bays silent of the heavy metal shipments that once defined the American car audio landscape. The brand itself survived corporate restructuring and acquisition by Patrick Industries, pivoting successfully into marine audio, off-road UTV sound systems, and OEM factory upgrades for modern trucks. But the core product that built the legend, the heavy, hand-built American amplifier designed to dominate the street, belongs to history. A surprising footnote remains buried in audio engineering archives. Jim Fosgate's original innovation, The circuit topology that combined high-current MOSFET power delivery with active low-frequency equalization was eventually recognized by the Audio Engineering Society as a foundational blueprint for automotive audio design. The man who started in a small Arizona workshop did not just build a loud stereo. He permanently solved the laws of physics inside a 12-volt cabin. The collapse of the Tempe assembly lines was not just the story of a company bowing to global manufacturing economics. It was a reflection of a broader American transition. The shift from heavy, over-engineered mechanical hardware built for durability and physical impact to lightweight, digital, integrated convenience. America stopped modifying its own dashboards, and the independent garages that built a culture out of copper wire and bass were left behind. Yet, in a quiet suburban driveway in Southern California, beneath the warm glow of a garage light, a vintage amplifier is bolted to the back of a custom enclosure. The ignition turns, the heavy heatsink warms up, the orange and black cone begins to move. Somewhere in an American garage, a vintage Rockford Fosgate Punch 45 still rests in the trunk of a classic sedan, its heavy aluminum cooling fins catching the light, waiting for the key to turn, the power to surge, and one more song to make the steel frame shake. See you in the next one.